Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at phoenixNAP. And with me today is Michael Deemer, Inside Systems Engineer at Veeam. Thanks for joining, Mike.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, William.
All right. And today we're going to talk about Office 365. And we're going to piece apart a couple different parts, specifically SharePoint, OneDrive, and as everybody's favorite, email. And really try to talk about what you're getting when you purchase a subscription for Office 365, right? And I think there are a lot of correct assumptions and there are a lot of incorrect assumptions about what you're purchasing in your subscription plan. And so we're going to try to knife into some of that. We're going to talk a little bit about solutions that Veeam has and that phoenixNAP have to help address some of those gaps. But before we get started, I wanted to toss up a couple poll questions just to try to get a feel for the audience, see where everybody's at, their business segment, try to understand, the major challenges that people have. That's going to help me guide everything together. So I'm going to launch that right now. Everybody should be seeing it. Hopefully. All right. And the poll is going. All right. We've got about 65%, 66%. Thank you everybody for filling this in. I know it's sometimes it's difficult to click a button, but thanks for doing that. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this up and I'll share the results with everybody. So we had about 31% business e-commerce, 10% finance, 59% education and government. Kind of makes sense. Veeam obviously has a really strong presence there, so do we. So that makes a lot of sense on that. All right, next one, last one for now. And we're gonna do size of organization. So this is gonna help me talk and frame the questions about that there are various challenges depending on the size of your organization, the things you're trying to accomplish with Office 365. So go ahead and hit that for me. And wow, got some big large int here today. So we have the ever-present commercial SMB segment, which is, like I said, a strong point for both of us, and also a lot of folks in the 1,000+ employees area. So, and again, thanks everybody for voting. Huge turnout on the polls. Perfect. All right, so we had 45% up to 500, 14% 500 to 1,000, and 41% over 1,000 employees. So your cohorts on the call moving strong. So I want to start by taking a piece from Microsoft's service agreement. I think this is really important. It's findable on their website. For those of you that want to see it, you can email us and we'll send it over to you. But ultimately, the service level for Office 365 is fairly limited, right? They're trying really hard, and they are maintaining multiple copies of data across multiple regions for email. There is high levels of data durability, right? And for the most part, high levels of availability, right? Because as you look at the investments that they're making into making the service world-class, we use Office 365 as an organization ourselves. There are outages, things happen everywhere, but ultimately they provide a really solid service. And, but they do specifically state, hey, look, we're not liable. And I think that they put this in here because there are some gaps. There are some places where things can be lost inadvertently. And or integrations that you make into Office 365 can have inadvertent effects. And although the data is highly durable and there's multiple copies, those copies are pretty much replicated instantly when they happen. So if you go, deletions have a recycle bin, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But if you go change, modify, copies of your data, those changes are pretty much replicated and they're set. And there is some versioning and some capabilities we'll talk about, but ultimately, poor outcomes can arise and have arisen, And that's the reason that they put this in the agreement. I think this is the clearest example of exactly what the shared responsibility model looks like for Office 365. So if you look at Microsoft, they're taking the charge as it pertains to the physical data center, the network infrastructure, and the systems that power Office 365. They do have an uptime SLA, although quite frankly, it's pretty poor, right? If you look at various other cloud services and established service providers providing services, the SLAs are not particularly high or in terms of number of nines of availability of the service, and the credit schedules are pretty lackadaisical as well. But they do a pretty good job of protecting data from massive hardware failures and power outages and things like that. Ultimately, though, as they talk about the shared responsibility model on their website, and there's a whole area about this on the website, you are in control of your data. Their stance is you as an organization leveraging their services are the data owner, and therefore you are responsible for its security, privacy, and availability, ultimately, right? You have to set access and permissions. They're not going to do that for you, right? You have to figure out how you're going to get a clean offsite copy of that data. For those of you that have been around backups for a long time, possibly Veeam customers, they talk about the 3-2-1 rule. One of those copies of data being offsite. In this instance, we're talking about off cloud, right? Ultimately off cloud, because that is going to give you a second copy of the data that is immutable, essentially, from the goings on inside the cloud provider. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. You are responsible for compliance. Now, Microsoft has a great set of compliance capabilities in their E5 package. There's some cool stuff there. There are a bevy of technologies that can help you with data protection. We're going to talk about the one that Veeam has and we leverage internally. Ultimately, the malicious activity is the one that's the scary part, and that's the big gap that we're going to spend a lot of time on. Whether that's kind of breach prevention or modification prevention, deleting things that you are not, or things that are being deleted that you're not aware of being deleted. It's one thing when you, the administrator, delete something, you make an error, and you go and fix it. There are some pretty robust capabilities inside of Office 365. It's another thing when a user comes to you 31 days after they deleted an email, and the recycle bin is 30 days, and that email's gone forever. If you don't have a copy, a retention-based copy of that data. So we're going to talk through a little bit more of that as we go. So these are the kind of top targets or causes for Office 365 data loss. And we are talking about all of Office 365 data, SharePoint, OneDrive, email in this case. I think that the first two really scare the most people, right? That you're either going to get hacked and somebody's going to delete everything, or they're going to, as it pertains to OneDrive specifically, they're going to perform some type of ransomware lockout or something like that. I think the one that most people probably should be more concerned with is insider threat, right? Because that's the kind of stuff where critical emails can get deleted and no one notices, and then all of a sudden you don't have a copy anymore and you're kind of stuck. There's a big difference between the guy that's haphazardly deleting email boxes and taking people offline, changing passwords, etc., and the person that knows what they're doing and are systematically deleting critical information from your servers and or the service in this case. And then the one that probably exposes most people is just people deleting stuff, people changing things and not realizing they changed. And it's sometimes as simple as like overwriting a document, and then the kind of versioning control period is over and the document is permanently changed and unchangeable again, right? I myself have done that, right? I'm putting together a PowerPoint and I modify the PowerPoint and I forget to do like a save as before I modified it. And I changed all the content in a PowerPoint and then realized that I've overwritten everything. And that sucked, right? You can't get that back, especially when you realize 5, 6, 7 months later that you did that. All right. And if anybody has questions, pop them into the questions. I'll take them live, or Michael will answer them on the back end. So if you've got anything, you have any specific things that you want answered, please toss them in there. And I think that ultimately when you look at the possibilities of things that can occur, the data that you have, it can be very valuable, and there are reasons that people want this data and or they want to keep you from getting access to the data. There's just some thoughts on that from a very high level here. It made it to the next slide. Mike, do you want to see if you can build that out for me? Hey,
Sure,
there we
will.
go. All right. So when we look at the top critical reasons to back up the data, right? We think that these are the most important. Accidental deletion, which is by far and away the most likely thing to happen. There are serious retention policy gaps that I think have to be addressed in order to ensure that the data that you think you have, you actually have it. Addressing insider security threats and various things that happen from inside your organization. Obviously, everybody's aware of the hackers out there and people trying to steal your information. I think legal and compliance requirements for a lot of folks. There are some ways in Office 365 to do like long-term data retention of OneDrive data and things like that, but they get really expensive really quick, mostly because the service wasn't designed to be that, right? And then anytime you have a disaster recovery or multi-cloud designs, i.e. you want to ensure that you have data portability, it's important to be able to get that data into a format that makes sense to your organization that isn't locked into the proprietary format of the Office 365 service. So these are kind of those really kind of top level, top tier reasons to consider backing up Office 365 data. It is pretty much the hottest thing going right now. People are starting to really feel the impact of not addressing some of these issues, and they're looking for solutions. I assume at least some of you are here because of that. All right, Mike, I don't know if we're going to be able to launch the poll. Oh, I got my mouse back, so we should be able to go. So I'm going to advance it over one more here and throw up the middle poll here, and then we're going to switch it over to Mike, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Office 365 backup solution from Veeam specifically. And let's see if I can throw that up. And how much data are you responsible for protecting in your environment, right? So less than 100 terabytes, 100 to 500 terabytes, and over 1 petabyte of data, or 500 to a petabyte, sorry. Perfect. I think that most of you guys are probably going to have less than 100 T. Looks like that's the case. We got about 50% less than 100 T, 28% 100 to 500, 20%ish 500 to a petabyte. That's pretty much what we see, the averages across the board. I think that the one thing I'll say about data size, right, and for those of you on the call today, is that I find that the people with the most important information sometimes have the least information to protect, right, and to keep. And for some small businesses, some bits of critical information can be so important that they can mean the existence of the whole business, right? And so when you look at the reasons to protect data, and you look at a couple of very basic concepts around data protection and security, a couple of things that we like to look at are the potential of an issue occurring, the impact of the issue occurring, in this case, losing Office 365 data, and ultimately those two kind of key drivers. How often do you think this is going to happen, and what happens to your business when it happens, right? This helps you kind of put a framework around what you should spend ultimately to protect it, right? And I think if you walk through, if you Google these, the technical terms are annual rate of occurrence and average loss expectancy. And those two key constructs can help you as a IT person, as a security person, as a compliance person, pitch the reasons for why you need to protect a piece of data or a system or anything ultimately. If you've got a chance of something happen is 1 in a billion and you only lose $1,000 if it does, well, probably do nothing, right? But if you've got, if you have 10 emails a year that go just extinct, that are not available anymore for some reason, right? And that causes thousands of dollars of data, tens of thousands of dollars of loss, right? Whether it's not having data for a customer or forgetting to fix something that someone had reported to you about your business, right? There's a lot of business impacting reasons that documents, collaboration information and email can cause disruption to a business. And so I think that hopefully this gave you a little bit of an idea of the major issues that exist. I'm going to send it over to Mike, and he's going to talk a little bit about what Veeam has in this area and go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, William. So first thing I really do want to cover is what is Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365? And that's really what I want to touch on first, and that's kind of what I really want to start this with. So let's see here. We're going to actually forward this just a little bit. There we go. All right. So Office 365 overall. So let's take on the Veeam perspective of Office 365. So what are we controlling? What are we actually backing up? So on and so forth. So basically, Veeam at a very high level is going to be backing up O365 data, but what we're trying to do is eliminating the risk of losing access and control of your O365 data. Now, that's going to be including Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. Now, overall, we're also going to give quick restore access. So let's just say you need to go in and restore just a particular email or just a particular SharePoint site. We can go in and granularly get these particular data sets out without actually pulling out the entire data set as a whole. Now, another big thing about O365 is where are we going to land the data? Where are we going to actually put the data at rest after we took the backup? Well, with Veeam, you can really land almost anywhere. So whether that be on-premise with phoenixNAP, in Azure or AWS, it really doesn't matter because we have that availability in those landing zones that you can land on. Now, the next biggest thing I really want to talk about is meeting the legal compliance and the requirements for an effective e-discovery. So let's just say you have to go out and have compliance and there's some type of lawsuit. Well, with O365, you might get lucky and go do an e-discovery. Now, e-discovery sometimes from O365 can take up to 24 hours, and for really long-term retention to up to 48 hours to even have Office go out and quiesce the database to even give you the snapshot of what it looks like. Now, Veeam, on the other hand, can actually read it right from the repository. So if you just need a quick an email from a couple months back, it's really easy. Go in there, search for it, and you can even make really broad terms. So, hey, this particular client sent me an email, and I just want to have everything with this particular client. Go in there, and you can pull them all as a PST. There's a lot of different ways that I'll go into a little later about how we can actually restore back. Now, obviously the main thing that we're doing is protecting your Office 365 data. But what we're really trying to do is protect you from accidental deletion, security threats, and retention policy gaps. Because like William was saying, a lot of people just don't know that they're there, or just don't know when their data is not being protected. So that's why Veeam really comes into shine, allowing for those retention policy gaps to be filled completely. And some on the next slides here, I'll be able to show you, and we'll really kind of go over the overall gist of O365 from an architectural level, and then what we can actually provide here from Veeam. So let's see if we can have this one go all the way to build out. William, could you, looks like I'm stuck here. Oh, just kidding. There we go. We're back up. So, all right, so this is going to be the actual architecture for Office 365. So if you guys want to look to the left of the screen here, right here where it says Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. So that's actually going to be the server of where it lives. Now, there's a couple different options here, and I'll kind of go over all of them. But let's just pretend this is, you're getting backup as a service. So you're tying into a service provider and they're just doing the backup. So whether you have an on-premise solution, so you're still fully on-prem, you have an Exchange server on-prem or a SharePoint server on-prem, or even you're in the hybrid phase where you have maybe some stuff up in the cloud and some still on-prem, but you're just not fully committed to the cloud yet. Any way that you chop that little bit up, we can protect that particular data. It doesn't really matter if you still have on-prem servers, you're in the transitionary period of actually moving the data all the way to cloud, but just not there yet. Or the third option is you're fully in the cloud, we can still protect that data. Now, I kind of want to go over a couple different landing zones that we have. So, of course, we can always land back on-prem. So if you want to land on a repository, back on site, you definitely can do so. But more importantly, what we're really trying to do is long-term retention or long-term archival for this data. So that's where like phoenixNAP or these other object storage providers really come into play, allowing for storing that data on a particular storage repository that's more for long-term archival more than anything else. Now, let's just say that you do need to actually do some restores. So on the very right-hand side, you're going to see the Veeam Explorer. So when you hear Veeam and you hear Explorers, that's actually how we get our data back and how we get it back and present it to the end user. I'll actually be going really in-depth on a couple different ways that we can do it, but very high level, the Explorers is how we do it. So we can either send or restore. There's a couple different options between send and restore, which I'll get into in a little bit of a later slide. But again, this is just high-level architecture, kind of showing you where your landing zones could be, what kind of availability you have, and all the different types of storage and places to store that you have at your fingertips. Now, next, I really want to talk about what it looks like from the Office perspective of your retention policies. So let's see if I can go to that next. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So let's kind of look at this of your, let's go back one, not two. All right, so let's go back to the actual retention policy and what it looks like here from O365, not the Veeam one. So from O365, you're going to be able to see here that you only on average, so let's actually go back here. So an average length of time for data compromise and discovery. So how long does it take to, one, realize that your data has either been compromised or that you actually realize that maybe you deleted an item that was a couple months old and that you actually want to go back to. So now, with that being said, that's the average, right, for actually how long it takes to get compromised or seeing that you actually need to restore something. Yet, the default settings for Office 365 are only 30 to 90 days. And realistically, it's really more leaning to that 30-day term more than the 90-day term. Now, as you see here, employee leaves the company. So very bottom of the queue, you really only have about a month. Now, that's even shorter depending if the client or the administration inside the IT department strips the license away. Because once the license is stripped away, the data is completely gone regardless of what actually happens. Now, if you had a backup with Veeam, not so much. Deleted items in OneDrive. This is going to be the same thing for SharePoint, auto archiving, and really deleted items. You're really going to see the same type of spectrum here. So you're really only going to have the first 30 days. And then after those first 30 days, if anything's been deleted or anything like that, it's gone. And then last but definitely not least, the actual inbox folder, which is a little longer because it's actually active. Now, what does Veeam actually protect and how long does it actually keep the data for, which is going to be a lot longer than your average O365 data. So let's actually move this. Let's go forward. There we go. All right, so as you see here from a very high overview, you're going to be able to, okay, man, it decided to go all of them. One back. All right, so again, from a very high overview, you're going to be able to see that it doesn't really matter how long you're keeping your data. Office 365 data is going to be kept forever with Veeam. So it doesn't matter if you have data retention going out for 7 years, for 3 weeks, or it really doesn't matter. We're going to be able to keep that retention period for long retention periods. Now, it doesn't really matter if you have a week retention, a year retention, 5-year retention, or 25-year retention. We're going to be able to back that up here with O365 and Veeam. Now, just like you've seen on the other slide, before we had all those different pieces where it didn't look like you were actually protected. But if you have a valid backup inside a repository, well, you're protected. Now, next I really want to get into is the retention, or not the retention, the restore process for Veeam, and how it looks like and feels like, and all the different bells and whistles that we have when actually doing the restore process.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to advance it for you, buddy.
Thank you. All right, so OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and Exchange. That's going to be the main driving factors here. Those are the data sets that we're collecting. So now, if you really look granularly here, you're going to be able to see these are all different types of ways that we can actually get the data and save the data in different ways and actually make it more easy for administrators, users, and really everybody that's actually going to be consuming the data at the end of the day. So let's just take a little quick glance here at Exchange. So we're going to be able to send and save the actual attachment as a message file or a PST, making sure that we have it for long-term archival. Also, one of the biggest things here is the service provider exchange for tenants. So let's just say you sign up with phoenixNAP, which would be an awesome move. You would also get a service provider restore portal that would actually allow for actually restoring of that data. Now, you can also restore the actual missing or changed items, so you can actually go back and look at versioning, look at when the actual, especially for like SharePoint and OneDrive, this really comes to more of a higher scale of like what type of version are we on? Are we on version 1? Are we on version 2.0? And then we can fall back or restore back to or revert back to the actual version that we're trying to get back to. Now, there's a lot that we can do from here, but just know there's a lot of different ways that we can actually get that data back to you or back to the site. So a bunch of different ways that you have available and chopped up for you. This is kind of the end of my time here, but I do want to pass it back over to one of our Platinum VCSP partners, William, and he'll be able to give you a lot of good information about phoenixNAP.
All right, guys. Thanks for that, Mike. I think the main comments that I'll make about the Office 365 backup product from Veeam is that it's flexible. It's very kind of third-party independent in the way that it acts, right? It allows you either as the buyer of the software that wants to run it on your own infrastructure, that's fine, or as the consumer of a service like ours, where we're managing this workflow and giving you the capabilities and managing the data. Whichever way you choose, ultimately you get a very independent, validated, and secure copy of your Office 365 data that is stored outside of Microsoft Office Cloud, right? And I think that there are a lot of wins that have been talked about in the last 25, 30 minutes about why that can be very important for your organization. But ultimately, why at least look at consuming it as a service, right? And I think that cloud-based consumption is what people are striving for. You went to Office 365 for a reason, right? You decided to go that route so that you could stop running Exchange on-prem and stop managing the data and stop having to buy servers and stop having to buy storage for it, right? That's why you went there. So when you look at backing the data up or getting some type of data protection service level, why go back into that modality? Why look at it and say, oh, well, I went to a service for my email and my file data, but then I want to buy servers and storage so that I can back it up. And I think that ultimately that's not a very good value proposition. It's going to be hard to sell up the chain. It's going to require resources for you guys to manage. And I think there are a lot of good ways to keep our customers in control of their data without having to manage everything soup to nuts. So we're building world-class infrastructure. For those of you that on this call that know who phoenixNAP is, that's all we do essentially, right? So we're taking care of the infrastructure. We're providing a top tier tool, right, from a top right Gartner Magic Quadrant backup and data protection provider, and a business model for you that is by the email box, by the user essentially. So you can pay by the month per user and get data storage, service delivery of the Veeam software, and a service level from us. And we still keep you in charge. We have ways of giving you control over your configurations and your customizable, the retention schedules that you want for your data. And we're building every bit of capability we can to help make sure that we get the total components of the Office 365 cloud, right? Or Microsoft Office cloud now, I guess, is what they're calling it. So, really keeping you in charge, but keeping you out of the hardware business as well. And I think that this sums it up, right? You get multiple, data center options around the globe. You get it fully managed by us, and you get really cost-efficient protection of the data, right? In the dollars per mailbox per month area. And that can help you look at it and say, okay, instead of paying $7.25 a month per user for Office 365 E3, you can pay $9.25 a month and get not only all that email storage, all that data storage, all the service that you get there, but also off-cloud data protection and tons of flexibility around e-discovery, around being able to restore email boxes back on-prem if you so chose one day, right, for certain users. There's all kinds of ways that this can be very important and valuable for your organization. But it's not the only thing we do as an organization around Veeam, right? We have a ton of Veeam-powered cloud services, offsite backups, disaster recovery as a service, integrated backups for our hosting infrastructure offering. So as Mike said, we're a platinum partner with Veeam. We've been working with them for 7.5 years now. And I do believe that there's no one better in the ecosystem at delivering a really amazing service around Veeam's data protection technologies. So this is kind of a picture of what everything looks like today, if one of those locations catches your eye. And then I'm going to end all this today with one more question that our marketing people want to have you guys answer. Would you guys like to talk to somebody about it? No harm feelings. If you say no, it's totally cool. We're here to educate. We're here to help people, try to make intelligent decisions about their infrastructure and their data. And so please answer up for us. And I hope that everyone had a really, really great day. I'll leave this up so everybody can get their answers in. I will be around for questions for a minute. If anybody wants to throw some questions up in the queue here, and with that, I think we'll end it. So let's see if I can go ahead and get the questions area. Anybody got anything they want to toss in? It's been a quiet group today. I'm sure everybody's webinared out. We're trying to keep this on a good pace for everybody, make sure we get a lot of different content places touched so that everybody feels like they have something that they want to learn from us. I think that'll cover us for today. Thank you, everybody, and have a great one.